new tariffs that I was told, we were all told were going to be announced today. I don't know if they have been announced.
Yeah, we're waiting till after the
Okay.
markets close.
Okay, all right. Well, we can all check back in tomorrow and see what happened there. We're so I think we're just interested in hearing about, how this could affect your businesses and other businesses. We had a little bit of a conversation last week, and I think the general sense was, why? And why does this make any sense at all? And it may not make sense for Vermont. Maybe it does make sense for other parts of the country. Maybe it doesn't make sense on a sort of a short term. We heard from FPR that there are long term, there are short term sort of implications. So anyway, I'll turn it over to you just to say hello and if you want to make some quick introductions.
Sure. Gwen Zakov, VFPA lobbyist. So I have 4 folks in today, 2 are going to be online and 2 in person. These folks have sort of different roles within the forest products industry and in different areas of Vermont. Some of them are quite small, some are large, some use locally sourced wood, some don't. So I just wanted to get into a different array of folks to talk about the impacts of tariffs, the threat of tariffs, and global markets, and maybe set sort of a stage of what their individual markets generally look like just on any given day. So you kind of understand how their businesses operate just in normal times and how they change when there's uncertainty and things like tariffs. So I think we'll just go in order and maybe start from the top and go to David.
Yeah, before we turn it over to you, David, why don't we just quickly introduce ourselves so you all know who you're talking to on the committee. And I know we've met some of you before, but I'll start. We'll just go around the room. I'm David Durfee. I live in Shaftesbury. I represent Shaftesbury and Sunderland and Glastonbury in Bennington County.
I'm Leland Morgan. I represent Grand Isle County and the western portion of Milton, and I live in
Jed Lipsky, Lamoille 1 District, Stowe.
Hi, Dave. Richard Nelson. Dave's one of my people, and I represent Orleans 1 in Derby.
Michelle Boslin. I represent Wyndham 3, which is Westminster, Rockingham, and Brookline in northern Wyndham County.
Hi, John O'Brien. I represent Windsor Orange 1, that's Royalton, and my hometown of Tunbridge.
Hi all, and I'm online from the farm, but Heather Supernaut, Windsor 4, Barnard, Pomfret, Bridgewater, West Hartford.
Okay, we do have one other committee member who is either boiling this morning or on his way here, I think. We're not sure.
Or pruning.
Yeah. So David, I don't think we've heard from you before, at least not this year. So if you want to just give us a quick introduction and then share with us whatever you'd like to.
And you're talking about me, right?
Yes, yeah.
I know there's a lot of David, so.
Yeah.
Dave LaForce. I co-own a company called Built by Newport in Newport, Vermont, with my wife, Julie. Second generation family business. We employ 65 people today. And been in business here since 1963. So do you want me to kind of cover what we do and roll into tariffs? Is that what you'd like me to?
I think so. Yeah. If you can talk about what you do, where you get, where you are in the supply chain, I think as Gwen said, sort of in normal times, what kind of product you use, who your customers are.
Yeah, absolutely. So as I mentioned, we started in 1963. Ironically, this is kind of full circle today because ironically, our business started because of tariffs. My father was working for a company up in Quebec and in the early 60s. And back in that day, Gardner, Massachusetts was the furniture capital of the United States. Just about every piece of furniture that was produced came out of that area. So the owner of the company he was working for was driven and wanted to sell into the US, but the tariffs was affecting the business. So they went out on a search for a location. and found the Prouty property here where we sit today still. And my father and family picked up their roots and moved to Newport to run that facility. So kind of full circle, because here we are today talking about tariffs, and it's kind of a piece of our history. So it's kind of a strange thing for us to even be talking about this. When we started our company, we were just making furniture components for other furniture manufacturers. As the company grew, we got into fully assembled furniture, where we had our own line of furniture, which is the glider rocker business, which maybe many of you have a glider rocker in your home today, because almost every home in Vermont has one of our chairs. We produced that product up to 2014. The imports kind of killed that business for us. The imports from China, we just couldn't compete. So we were going to go back into 100% just furniture components for other furniture manufacturers. But at the time, a lot of our customers were tired of holding inventory. We were making all their parts anyway. So a lot of them just started asking us to assemble the products for them, so they didn't have to worry about inventorying components. And that's where our business shifted. Our business name used to be called Newport Furniture Parts. We shifted to Built by Newport because today we build and manufacture fully assembled furniture, and that's 80% of our business, where 20% of our business is still furniture components. Our customer base today is high-end retail throughout the United States, and high-end designers. So we're definitely on the high-end spectrum, which we needed to do that because the lower side is all imports today. So it's our only way to stay in business. We're a little unique in the furniture industry because we don't have what's called a rough mill. We don't today currently buy rough lumber. We started that strategy back in 2000 because we had started another company called Newport Panels in North Troy, Vermont. With the help of Vermont, we were able to set that company up. We're successful for 8 years. Then 2008 happened, and 75% of our customer base went out of business. So we couldn't recover from that. But at that time, we were already set up where the rough mill portion of our business was outside of our walls. So we were able to secure partnerships with 3 new suppliers when we closed down that company in 2010. One is in Ohio, one's in Pennsylvania, and one is in upstate New York. And today they produce for us dimensional lumber and glued panels, which we use for all of our products. Most of them do buy lumber from Vermont, specifically red oak and hard maple and soft maple. So definitely the forest product industry for us is very important to our business. Like I mentioned today we employ 65 employees. We do have a lot of growth. I would say our biggest holdback today is finding employees. A big part of that is the lack of housing. So that's a whole nother topic. But you know, today, if I could hire 10 more people and could find them, I would. So that's definitely a challenge for us. As far as the tariffs go, I would say that the biggest impact to us right now, 30% of our business today is uses veneered material. That veneered material kind of comes in a lot of flavors as far as where it's from. 100% of the veneer is produced in the United States. Most of it specifically from Columbia Forest Products, right here in Newport. The MDF core of that material is produced in Canada. And then the assembly of that veneer onto the MDF core happens in Canada. So we have a great partnership with that mill in Canada. It's a 5-generation company. They employ over 200 employees. To say that they're scared is putting it, mildly, about this tariff situation. 90% of their production comes to the U.S.
Got a question here, David. Representative Nelson.
Yeah, thank you. Dave, where is that mill in Canada? How far out?
They're north of Toronto.
North of Toronto. Okay, so they're in Ontario, basically.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're in a very small community. I think the population is, I want to say 4,000. So they're one of the main employers in their area. So, and interestingly enough, 90% of their production comes to the US. 70% of their production actually goes to one of my largest customers, because my largest customer is very US minded. I think 94% of their products that they sell today are produced and made in the United States. However, the majority of their suppliers buy from this one mill. And so right now we're all scrambling because the market will not bear a 25% increase. The unfortunate thing that's happened is the minute that the tariffs were announced in February, 3 of the major mills in the United States increased their pricing. And just in this last week, I mean, this material is the majority of our import product, but we do obviously buy a lot of fasteners. And what we're seeing specifically with the fasteners and brackets that we use, we received many emails in the last week advising us that we're going to experience dramatic price increases because all of the factories and mills in the United States in steel are increasing their pricing by 25%. So it's a tough time. There's a lot of uncertainty. We're not very happy that a lot of the U.S. facilities are taking this approach and increasing their prices, because I think that the opposite was supposed to happen. So it definitely puts us in a real predicament because, even though we're high-end furniture, it's very competitive. We had a real hard time through COVID. We passed some price increases to our customers that we would never have thought of, even imaginable, before COVID, 10, 15, 20%. Luckily we made it through that period, but now the market is very sensitive. We passed a 5% price increase this year for 2025, and that was hard to do. And we have seen a little bit of ramification from that in business. So we're a little nervous on what this means going forward.
David, a large part of your business is now assembling furniture and then selling it to retailers, or
Correct.
Are they around the country, Northeast?
No, the entire United States, coast to coast.
Okay. Did I see a hand here? Representative Lipsky.
Thank you, David. Back in the day, there were many producers of what they call furniture squares, for chair legs, table legs, braces. Do you buy furniture squares, or do you make furniture squares for your solid hardwood products?
We buy the squares. And that's something that's been challenging as well, especially in Vermont. There's so many sawmills closing. And unfortunately, there's not a lot of new generational youth that are going to that industry. So, it makes us a little nervous with all these sawmills closing, because it's very challenging to recreate that and build that again. Once it's gone, typically it's really hard to come back, and it's gone. So that makes us nervous because, it's a big part of our business. We need the lumber. So I'm hopeful that the trend of these sawmills closing and loggers disappearing doesn't continue, because it'll be detrimental to our business.
Dave, so you mentioned that the supplier who's located in a small town outside of Toronto was, understandably worried. If they were to go out of business or have to scale back and no longer be able to supply you, where would that leave you? At least short term, and then if we step back and say, as I mentioned earlier, and as we heard the other day, nobody expects a mill to suddenly reopen tomorrow or for a new mill to suddenly, start. But does that feel to you like down the road that could happen?
Well, we are talking to two mills right now, because obviously we need to, that are located in the US. One of them is located in the upper Midwest. They've given us initial pricing. They are more expensive than what we're paying today. But they've also been warned about in their supply chain that the pricing they gave us is only good for 15 days. Because they currently import veneer from Canada. So they're not clear on what tariffs are going to be applied to that. So, I think we'll be able to get material. It's just the pricing is going to be definitely higher. And it's hard because we have such a good partnership with this mill currently in Canada. The last thing we want to do is pull our business away from them. But we also have to be sensitive to our business and the impact to our pricing. Because like I said, the market can only bear so much. So it's a highly competitive business out there in furniture. So, it's a tough challenge.
Representative Nelson?
So Dave, if the veneer leaves Columbia Forest Products 3 miles from you, goes up, gets applied to what it needs to be applied to. It has to go somewhere to get rolled out and applied, whether it's up in Ontario or if it's in Wisconsin or northern Maine.
Mm-hmm.
And if the tariffs coming out of Canada are 25%, and if those mills all raise their rates 25% because they can, and veneer is tariffed by Canada going north, is that tariff now? Do you know that before this, was that veneer from Columbia tariff going? It wasn't. Okay. And was your product tariff before coming back south?
No.
It wasn't. Okay. So that's reciprocal. I don't see why. Anyway. And if everyone goes up 25% and the fasteners go up 25% and the roller wheels and the slides and everyone does it, that sounds inflationary to me. Unfortunately.
Yeah, for sure.
Representative O'Brien?
Dave, how much does the US Canadian exchange rate affect your business with Canadian partners? Because is it a good deal for you because there's a better exchange rate, or does your relationship follow that exchange rate too, depending on what it is on the dollar?
That, as far as the veneer and material goes, we structured our relationship in US dollars, specifically because we just didn't want to deal with the headache of price fluctuation up and down depending on the exchange rate how it went. I can tell you that, despite what the exchange rate does, our pricing stays very consistent with this mill. We don't experience, month-to-month variations in pricing. I can tell you that our price has been the same for almost a year and a half with that facility, which is important to us. Price stability is very important to our business. So.
Yes, go ahead.
Dave, did you have any export market into Canada with your finished product, or was it pretty much all US?
It's all US.
Yeah, okay.
Dave, last question before we turn it over to Bill. Are you hearing or do you have any sense of what the like ultimate impact on retail pricing might be?
It's so hard because we really don't even know what the tariffs are going to be yet.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll have some idea by the end of this week now. So we're supposed to find out today, but it's I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know because I don't know what the impacts are going to be yet.
Yeah, fair enough. Yes.
David, just want to thank you for making solid hardwood furniture. Consumers are willing to pay more for something that doesn't fall apart, 3 months after you assemble it. So thank you for what you're doing.
I appreciate that. And we're very fortunate because our customer base is very mindful of sustainability. And that's who we align ourselves with. The furniture we build will last for generations. So we're proud of that. None of our stuff goes to landfills. I can assure you that.
All right. Well, thanks for coming in. And I'm sorry that the circumstances are what they are. We all are. But it was also good to hear from Vermont business that's doing what you're doing. And if you'd like to stay on the call, please feel free. But if you need to go back to work, we would understand that too.
No, I appreciate you guys letting me come in.
Thank you, Dave. Appreciate you. Thanks.
Yep.
All right. So we're going to hear now from Bill Sargent, who will join us at the table.
Center?
Yeah.
Yes, I even wrote everything down so I wouldn't get sidetracked, David. David's my representative. I'm from Shaftesbury. Good morning, everybody. And I thank you for this invitation to come up here today. Thanks, Glenn, for letting me tag along. Poor Jed already knows me. Jed and I go back 40 years. Make a long story short, my Bennington County legislators, including Chairman Durfee, have gotten used to seeing my wildlife management little blogs every couple of weeks, passing on information to legislators about what's going on in wildlife management. This is strictly, I'm going to talk strictly FYI for your information. I'm from Worcester, just up the road originally. Went to Montpelier High School, UVM Forestry School, graduated in '74. This is my 51st year in May in the business. Semi-retired. My son, we're very small, but for the past 20 years, I've worked with my son operating a log and timber marketing firm in Shaftesbury, Cambridge, New York, that whole southwestern Washington County area. We market logs for loggers and private landowners in markets all over the world. Because of my experience, I have a pretty extensive list of contacts. Pretty lucky in that regard because it helps me predict what might happen, not this week, but going forward. In the past several weeks, there have been conversations about the effects of tariffs on Vermont business. I'll see if I can give you an update to see how it might affect loggers, truckers, yards like myself, and sawmills. Many of our logs, especially low-grade hardwood, go to Canada. As of now, there are no tariffs on those logs going to Canada. Most US mills don't currently have the technology in place to saw that small diameter log and make money on it.
When you say low grade hardwood, what makes it low grade? It's
Knots, rot, size.
size. Okay.
The smaller the log, the closer to the knots in the center of the log, and more of them.
Representative O'Brien's got a question.
How does that end up in retail world?
Yeah, it ends up in pallet material to build in the industrial pallets. It ends up in flooring, low-grade flooring. And a lot of the big flooring mills are in Quebec, just across our border. They take a low-quality log, small diameter log, and cut it up all into little short pieces, clear pieces, even pieces with knots. They cut out the knots and piece it all together, make some beautiful floors. Make railroad ties out of those. All the treating plants are in Quebec. Now, am I correct on that? All the close ones, right, in the Northeast. I'll lean on him a little bit because they do a lot of them. Most mills in Vermont, and in fact, the Northeast ship a big percentage of their lumber to Canada. That low-grade material I'm talking about makes up at least 1/3 most mills' production. This outlet has slowed right down to almost nothing, and it's building up in the supply chain as we sit here. These mills are sawing, and in the center of every log, even the high-grade log, there's a 4x4, 4x6 right down the center. It's low-grade material. And generally, it makes up 1/3 of the production at least. They can't purchase, go ahead.
So would that be a byproduct? Even veneer mills have that core that
They do have a core, and depending on the mill, some of them have cores that are 4 inches, some of them are 6 inches. The new ones are down to almost 2 inches. And they'll spin that and unroll it just like a sheet of toilet paper. And even the core material for these big veneer mills is difficult to sell right now. Even the highest grade maple veneer log has that core in the center of it. And it's still 20% of the material in that log. You just heard from somebody that uses an engineered panel in his furniture. It's fantastic. There are mills in the United States that make that panel. I'm getting way off this thing. Back 25 years ago, I started shipping high-end maple logs from Vermont all the way back into the Upper Peninsula of Michigan by rail. And we were shipping 4 to 5 rail cars a week out of Southern Vermont, New York, that area. We're small now. We've downsized. They were doing 2 shifts, needed more material. Now they're selling most of it, but it's difficult. We ship 1 or 2 loads a week by tractor trailer. Comically enough, sometimes they pick up veneer and come back east with veneer and then pick up logs and make the loop. And my son takes care of that dispatch. It's important. Keep your transportation costs down. We're all scared. The tariffs, this material, whether it's coming or going, it's going to do a 25% tariff. It will put some people, it'll shut them right down entirely. Their margins aren't 25%. The same day President Trump announced the tariffs on Canadian products, he announced tariffs on China. China reacted a little differently. They didn't talk about tariffs on logs. They just said, your logs no longer make phyto USDA inspections. We're finding insects in the containers that have been debarked or fumigated. We don't want your logs anymore. Your lumber is okay. They're accepting some lumber, but not at the rate they were. That's been dry kilned. But they just said, we're not taking your wood anymore. And it immediately created a huge, it was like slamming the door. And I'll get into more about that in a few minutes. But they just claimed improper inspections. Across the Northeast, including Vermont, loggers and foresters had ramped up harvests of ash logs to salvage them before emerald ash borer hit them. Major effort to ramp up, and it's gone on for, this is the 3rd or 4th year. Southern Vermont is loaded with emerald ash borer. It's creeping north, continues, and we can have as foresters discussions on the right way to handle it. My personal opinion is cut it before you lose it. And I'm seeing decent response from small diameter ash, but we can have this discussion. This current ban means these logs can't be shipped out of the ports in a timely fashion. When purchased, these mills and yards base their purchase price on export pricing, not the domestic log market. 40 or 50% difference in what that log was worth in the domestic lumber market to what it was worth as an export log. So yards like myself, sawmills included, loggers, we're all shipping logs for export. Hurry, hurry, hurry before they're stone cold dead. And they'll go from being alive this year and 2 years from now, they're standing dead on the stump. And they're not, you don't even want to cut them for firewood. That's how dangerous they are. Shaftesbury's full of it.
Is it dangerous to the logger?
Yeah, to the logger. I mean, you got full of dead limbs overhead, and even mechanical crews with big fella bunchers don't want to cut it down because it just smashes on their equipment and everything else. It's a hazard. But trucking and shipping infrastructure has also been a problem in previous years. This year was no different. Many mills and yards couldn't find timely freight for those ash logs to go to New York City or to Boston through the port. And even when they got there, you've all read about the slowdowns in the ports. These guys all suffered from it. The turnaround used to be into Boston. You could do 2 trips a day, maybe a half a trip extra. And they're lucky to get 2 in now. Normally, it really hasn't made a difference in the past because this time of year, when there's more trucks available, they get caught up on the trucking to the port. And so they truck all the close wood first when it's easy. And then these yards that are further away from Boston or New York City, they'll get to them and they'll get caught up. This year, we've lost a full month now of no trucking ash to the ports, with a few exceptions that I'll talk about. But these logs have a shelf life.
Mhm.
And my understanding, once you put them underwater, you can't stuff them back in a container and send them overseas. They'll just split, check, fall apart. There's
Talk about underwater.
sprinkler systems that a lot of mill yards, big mills have a sprinkler system to keep their logs from degrading in the summertime. And
It extends their
extends their shelf life.
shelf life. But if you do that, you can't
Export.
export.
Yeah.
They basically, as soon as you take the water off of them, you have to put them through the mill immediately.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they degrade quickly.
And you put them
You can
in.
only put certain species underwater.
That's right. Oak and ash are 2 of them. And we're talking about ash. That's the big ticket item for guys in Vermont, loggers, truckers.
Just wanted to say,
Fire away, Dave.
we should have Trevor introduce himself.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I keep leaning on Trevor because.
Yeah, which is fine. And, but just for the record, Trevor, you can say who you are.
Yeah, I'm Trevor Allen from Allen Lumber down in Braddock. We have 65 employees spread out between our two main locations down in Braddock Road, plus 4 outside log yards, West Pollock, Vermont, Bristol, Vermont, Bethel, Vermont, and Haverhill, New Hampshire.
He'll hear more from you in a few minutes.
If I ever get through.
I just wonder what becomes of this ash?
It gets on eventually.
Right, but overseas, what are they using it for?
Same thing we're using it for here. Flooring. I have one customer that makes pool cues out of them. Now,
Baseball bat.
baseball bat, not so much anymore. You want a baseball bat? It's gone to maple. Yeah, a big portion. Do you want an ash bat that's full of emerald ash borer? It loses its strength really quick, with some exceptions.
Get it out of the Northeast Kingdom.
It's still probably okay today. They've gone to maple. All your major leaguers, the colleges are using aluminum. Tariff on that? I don't know.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Representative Morgan.
They make some furniture out of ash too.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so
Yes. But the big problem is
Canoe.
canoe parts, sure. The big problem is these logs have been purchased depending on an export price. And now you got to sell them into a domestic market that's considerably less. And somebody like Trevor over here has to put his additional costs into that log. I've known his dad and done business for a lot of years. they have a sawing schedule all set up. And they weren't planning on sawing ash. And now they yes, they can put it underwater, but they have to fit it into that sawing schedule. Some of this ash has been diverted to Vietnam. I might as well throw this thing out. A lot of your big exporters also have a Vietnamese market. The problem with Vietnam is that they have a limited capability of sawing the volume of logs. They don't have the infrastructure at the ports. They don't have the infrastructure to truck it to and from the ports. And just to make the water a little more muddy, those mills are all owned by Chinese companies. So they immediately dropped the price when China stopped buying it. It was people scrambled to sell logs to Vietnam. The price went down quickly. And China is continuing to look for other hardwoods. They're available into Russia and other places. But let me see if I can get back on track here somewhere. I'm going to skip over talking about softwood. I mean, there's been there are 14 point something % tariffs on softwood lumber crossing the Canadian border as we speak. They're talking about putting an additional 25% on that softwood lumber. Who's going to pay? American consumer.
And so softwood,
Pine,
yeah,
spruce, hemlock, cedar,
For
balsam fir goes in with a spruce. I use them interchangeably.
and those are all harvested in Vermont?
All harvested in Vermont. Northeast Kingdom is the big player in the spruce fir business and all the cedar. I worked at Burke Lumber Company as their head of procurement for years.
how a lot of sawdust that.
You bet you did. I remember it well. Back in the early 90s.
In the 80s, yeah.
Yeah, in the 80s. They were bought by a company off the West Coast and then they filed bankruptcy and it was a big mess. Yeah, it was a mess, but
Useless.
terrible. But that's another story.
They weren't near as good as Dion.
No, I know. No, don't comment.
I had a drink.
The president said we're going to cut more timber on the national forests. Sounds good. We can probably, everybody can agree that we ought to cut more timber on the national forest. We need more softwood lumber in the short term. He says we're going to get it out in the West, off national forests up there. The problem is most of those mills have been all shuttered in the last, you've all read about it. It goes back 10, 15, 20 years.
Spotted owl.
Spotted owl, all the different reasons we can talk about, those mills have been shuttered. You're not going to start them up just like clicking your finger. All the infrastructure's gone, the truckers, the loggers. Some of the mills are still there intact, my understanding. But you're looking at a 3 to 5 year project just to get them back up and running. Personally, I wouldn't invest my money in something that's might work out in 3 to 5 years. And they're going to have a difficult time. It's going to have to come from private money that wants to run it. So where do you look then? You look down south for this softwood lumber. There's lots of softwood harvested into dimension and processed into dimension lumber down south. It can be ramped up. Interestingly enough, the Canadian mills in the last 5 or 6 years, when tariffs hit in the first administration, reached out and started buying mills down south. Some of the biggest players down south are Canadian mills. How's it all going to play out? Some of the material goes back into Canada on tractor trailers, believe it or not. You know, longer material for trusses and things like that. I don't know. I don't have any answers, you know.
Representative Lipsky.
Yeah, Billy, loblolly pine.
Sure.
Long needle, long leaf pine.
Yeah.
That's what's really.
That's what-
going in the
yeah.
southeast. How does that work for trust stock?
I couldn't answer that question. I don't know. It's, yeah, all the southern yellow pines.
That's all.
Yeah, longleaf. I understand it works okay, but I don't have any,
Not like spruce.
I'm a Northeast
You
guy.
want to see some big clear spans? I can show you. They were made in Pennsylvania and trucked up here.
John,
That sort of business rules, are they vertically integrated companies too, whether it's Georgia Pacific or Irving or Warehouse, or do they own the land, they own the mills and they sort of own?
Some yes, some no.
Uh-huh.
A lot of them just own mills and they're dependent on private timber to wood those mills. They like that. They're not depending on crown lands to get their timber anymore. They're dependent on private and they've been very successful so far getting it. One of the big questions we've been dealing with, the lumber tariffs on hardwood were on for a few days, currently off. I think I misspoke Sunday when I was talking to you, Dave. And it depends on who you're talking to. Some people say that they're paying tariffs on hardwood and it doesn't make sense to me, but whatever. I've reached out to contacts all over the United States into China, knowing I was coming up to talk, trying to gather information. Dave and I talked on the phone Sunday, and I told him if my phone buzzes in my pocket, it might be latest information, and I might peek, but I won't because I don't think there's going to be any latest information until tonight. I'm not optimistic we're going to get much information tonight even. I think it's going to, because of the Canadian elections, and this is just Bill guessing and talking to some of my sources, okay? Big decisions are going to be made after the Canadian election, just guessing. I'm going to wrap up sort of by saying, where's my crystal ball say we're headed? And what can you do as legislators to help? In the short term, you're doing exactly what you can do. Listen, understand the forest products industry the best you can. And we may reach out again at some point. And you're already going to be 3 steps ahead by listening to what things like this today. It's a worldwide problem, not a statewide problem. Yeah, we got statewide issues, but I've touched on some of them. I'd like to see more mills. In my remarks, I mentioned, and I talked to Wayne this morning, one of the biggest mills that we lost in the last 10 years was one of the biggest users of low-grade logs, Rutland Plywood Corporation. When they burned down, was a massive loss. And I look back over my 51-year career since I got out of UVM, and there was mills all over the state of Vermont. But the biggest one that I would say had an impact was Burke Lumber Company, or not Burke, I'm sorry. Got Burke on the brain. The loss of Rutland Plywood, because they used every species, all lower grade materials, and made a very high-end value-added product right there in Rutland.
when was that? When did that occur?
Somebody want to help me? It's in the last 10 years, isn't it, that we lost Rutland? Okay, I'm showing my age again. These log tariffs have even impacted little companies like myself. It's just my son and myself now. We used to ship, like I said, 5, 6 rail cars of maple veneer, birch veneer out into the Upper Peninsula of Michigan every week, and traveled all over Vermont, competing with Columbia Plywood, Commonwealth Plywood, to buy that material. And it got shipped back to Vermont in some cases. But personally, our March purchases were down 60%. Some of it was weather related. We had an early mud season, and I didn't talk about that, but that was some of the impact that we felt. We had a Monday morning where we found out we could no longer ship ash logs. Big New York State mill that we shipped 3 to 4 tractor trailer loads of real high grade logs called up and said, we're so full of logs and there's so much uncertainty this morning. We just got a phone call. We're not buying logs for 30 days. Price isn't the problem. We're just not going to buy them till we saw our inventory down. All this stuff. The Canadian mill called up and said, we're gonna have to limit you till we figure out what's going on. But then they called back an hour later and came down and gave us an order for some high grade material that they'd been buying out of the United States. Didn't want to have to pay tariffs on it, knew they didn't have to pay tariffs on logs. And we did a high-end gymnasium floors for them a few years ago. They reached out to us and we shipped them 6 tractor trailer loads in the last 2 weeks of that material. And the ordering is good till today. Then we'll stop, look back at it again, restudy it. I know there's no 25% to be made for anybody by lowering log costs or anything. Our sales were down 30% from a year ago for the month of March. I'm projecting them to be down over 50%, no matter what happens, for the month of April. We haven't had a bad month, as bad a month as that since COVID. When COVID hit, the door slammed everywhere and sales disappeared.
Representative Nelson.
Billy.
Yep.
You work for Dion.
Yep.
You work with a lot of people. What would it cost? Is it even a remote possibility, but what would it cost to build a mill in the state of Vermont? Vermont's not that big a state. You center it right, you could build one that can handle hardwood, softwood, 2 different critters. I understand that. It's a goat and a cow. But,
It is a goat and a cow.
all right, it's a goat and a cow, but both of those make milk, both these make lumber, so. What would it cost to build that type of mill?
I wouldn't even dare guess.
That's set up as good as they have in Quebec? And they have, the laser and they can do things.
Some of those Canadian mills bypass the labor problem that they also had at COVID. And they did it by installing robotics to handle all the mills, all the lumber coming through their mills, all handled by robots. It's all timed. And they had an awful time getting the programming done to handle all the sorting, all the, grade, everything's done by robotics in that mill. The other difference is most of your mills are in Vermont, especially your little ones, are all sawing. What's your kerf on your band mill right now? It's under a quarter.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah. Mills in Maine, Irving, are sawing pine with an eighth inch. For every 4 saw passes they make, they gain a board. Huge money.
With the band.
With an 1/8-inch band. And as a matter of fact, they changed their scaling practices, so they pay on an 1/8-inch scale. Mill Rivers recently opened up. That needs to go to a thinner curve head rig. It needs to go to, in their gang saw, needs to go to a thinner curve.
Right, we're getting a little technical here, no, which is fine, but
Jump in, I'll try to answer your question.
yeah, go ahead, Terry.
I wouldn't even
Trying to saw spruce structural softwood, you can't, there's really no practical way to do that and saw hardwood and white pine.
Well, you'd have to have
They're 2 different, you could saw.
same yard, but 2 different.
Yeah, you have 2 different mills. You could theoretically saw hardwood and white pine on a mill that was designed to do both. There are a couple ways of doing that with new mills. Rough estimate, if you were gonna saw, you'd have to be somewhere in the footage range of 15 million of hardwood if it ran just hardwood for the year, and probably 20 million feet of pine if it ran just pine for the year to make it financially viable. My guess is realistically, I think $40 million might build it, not including the planer line you need for the white pine, because then you spend another 2.5 there. And then after you spend the $40 million, you have to be prepared to take probably $5 to $6 million in losses over the next 2 years while you're trying to get everything running properly and train the appropriate crew to run it if you can find the people. So, and that doesn't include buying the land to put in. And it would probably take realistically 4 to 5 years to get it built.
Yeah, I know about building a 999 square foot barn with a rotary milking pallet.
Yeah.
Bill, yeah, go ahead if you want to.
The other issue is availability of the resource. You're not gonna saw spruce in southern Vermont or the southern half of Vermont. You're not gonna build a spruce mill capable, even with the latest technology, that could do the volume that Burke Lumber Company that Dion built back in the day. You know, they were cranking out 18 to 20 million feet a year. That resource, part of the reason that mill is gone is the resource was cut. Are we still cutting spruce up in the Northeast Kingdom? Of course we are. But, and it's being sold into Canada. It's being sold into New Hampshire over to Mylands. But that resource got cut really, really hard. And when I was there, I realized that they were having problems. So I was reaching out into southern Vermont, buying hemlock, buying red pine. And we found out you could put a SPF stamp on a red pine 2x4, graded properly. And so they started mixing that into the mix because they couldn't get enough spruce.
Representative O'Brien.
Just a quick question for you two. Is there ever talk about, like say, following Richard's line of thinking here, say we're gonna put a state-of-the-art veneer mill somewhere in the Northeast.
Mhm.
And say New England and New York State, say this is gonna help all our loggers and foresters here, wherever it's located, whether it's, central Vermont, New Hampshire. Because it just reminds me of the sort of thing where in Tunbridge, we can't afford an ambulance. So, but Royalton, Sharon, and Tunbridge, we've all put money into building, an emergency center. And I wondered if New England states, whether it's the council of state governments or, ever talk in this way, like this would help all of the Northeast. We need a veneer mill here. We have great veneer logs here too.
We have one.
We have one
We have a veneer mill.
in Newport, one of the best ones in the world.
And they also Columbia owns, there's a mill in Presque Isle.
And they, a mill up in Ontario, one in Wisconsin.
One in Wisconsin.
The reality is Billy's spot on about markets. All of our spruce, even from Maine, which was a huge wood basket for generations, much of that goes up to Lake Mechanic or Quebec for processing. We don't have a spruce mill.
Our little teeny yard handled almost 3 million feet of pine 2 years ago, and it all went to Irving up in Maine in tractor trailers. We'd lost Mill River, and so I went scrambling a little bit, and glad to see. I hope Mill River. I hope they can make it work.
I want to give Trevor a chance to come up too, but before you switch seats there, Bill, you mentioned, I think earlier in your remarks, that you were concerned that, again, there's a lot of uncertainty. We will know more, maybe today, later on today, maybe not right away, but you had concerns about somebody somewhere in the supply chain not being able to stay in business. Who were you thinking of? Or what?
I won't go into specifics, but
What
category
or what?
be it a yard that has, say a yard has 150,000 feet of these ash logs we're talking about, that it's in a yard situation. So in order to sell it, they either have to sell it to Vietnam at a loss, if they can sell it to Vietnam, or they have to sell it to a sawmill, which really doesn't want it much right at the moment because they're also full of materials. And they've got a huge amount of money tied up.
Mhm.
Personally, I look back when right at the election, and I'm not going to talk politics, but I looked and I said, what was the effect of the tariffs in his first administration? And I said, the first thing tariffs went on was China. I said, what happened then? What happened now? And so consequently, we made a decision, my son and I did, to sell our wood through somebody that was debarking, fumigating, doing that. They could get containers because they were close to the port of Boston. They paid me 3 times a week or twice a week. I like that. And our exposure was never more than $30,000, $40,000 at a time of logs. And he called up the day that this all happened and said, don't worry about that, Bill, just ship them. We'll take care of you because we want you around again down the road. we'll adjust prices, talk in a week, adjust prices, and we did. But we made a conscious decision where our log yard is not a good place to get containers at all. They would rather go down the Hudson River Valley to a big yard down there, can go round and round 2 turns. Coming to us, it's 1 turn. So that particular area from Albany north is a tough spot to get containers. Used to run them out of the Port of Albany, and that closed up 20 years ago, something like that. That was a big business.
All right, well, I appreciate your, yeah.
Really great testimony.
Thank you.
I threw that out.
Uh,
I do that every day.
if you have a copy of it, Bill,
I'll get it to Gwen. She
okay.
can forward it on.
Okay, thank
I mean, there's a lot of stuff I didn't.
That'd be good to have.
I told you.
All right, good morning again.
Okay. Yeah, I guess I already introduced while Bill was talking, but I'll try not to double cover anything he's talked about so far. But so our sawmill saws about 10.5 million board feet of hardwood a year. And we're also, I believe we're the largest purchaser of hardwood logs in the state. So we're buying around 17 million board feet a year. And then on top of that, we're buying 3 million more of just stuff that's generated through forestry jobs, pulp, firewood, spruce. We handle spruce for another large company who's got 2 mills in Maine and 1 in Canada. So it's, somewhere around 3 million feet of that, and a little bit of white pine that we don't generally trade that. So as Bill was saying, we came into February when the first round of tariffs with China piece came in. We had close to 500,000 feet of logs between red oak and ash that was all destined to get exported. And the same thing happened. China said, that's it, no more logs. Most of ours were actually headed to Vietnam, but because China shut off, containers on the water at the time all got diverted to Vietnam and kind of flattened the market for a while. Right at the moment they went on, we thought we were looking at $350,000 to $400,000 worth of loss, maybe all the way across the board. And now it seems like we're probably about break even on them. Just get our handling costs out of it, so it won't be quite so horrible. We're also selling a lot into Canada. We're talking about the small pallet logs. They don't yield much when we're putting them through the sawmill. Our mill has, between the 2 machine centers, we have 16 lines a minute per day to get as much wood through the mill as we can, and sawing a log that's a 8-inch diameter, you just don't get enough footage through the day that you can make any money on. So those logs have always been primarily going to Canada. One of our yards trades almost exclusively with Canada for maple, the one up in Bristol, because they're too far from us to truck all the way down to Brattleboro.
Trevor, can I interrupt for a second? Sorry to break your train of thought, but I know you mentioned this earlier. I just wanted to reiterate, you have a sawmill in Brattleboro.
Yeah.
But then you also have properties around, you mentioned Paulet.
Yeah, West Paulet, Vermont, Haverhill, New Hampshire, Bethel, Vermont, and then the old A. Johnson facility in Bristol, we're trading out of there.
So, and none of those you're not cutting anything there. Those are all.
They're all just log concentration yards. With the exception of Bristol, a percentage of everything from the other 3 comes to Brattleboro to help us feed the mill. We're kind of, buying everything we can from the loggers, log run, and then the things we think we can make money on sawing, we bring to Brattleboro. The ones we can't make money sawing, we're reselling.
Shipping somewhere else.
Either other mills in the area, we sell some to other mills, or they're going export either to Canada or into Asia. And then I may get caught up a little bit because typically when we talk in the lumber business about export, we have never considered Canada to be export. We've always considered it part of our domestic market. When we talk about lumber, I may have to stop myself a minute there because again, until a few weeks ago, we always considered it practically domestic.
Representative O'Brien.
I remember, Trevor, last year, you gave us some context, like you said you were sort of a mid-sized mill.
Yeah.
So and you mentioned some in New York, like how big are they? Like the really big.
Yeah, so Vermont, we're large.
Right, yeah.
We have the most in-state hardwood lumber production.
Northeast, yeah.
But yeah, when you get onto New York, there's a number of mills that are producing anywhere from 90 to 130,000 in a 8 or 9 hour shift, whereas we're producing 43 to 48,000 board feet in a 9-hour shift. And I think that's going to stay that way. The logging culture and the ground is different when you get out into New York. In Vermont, I don't think you could ever feed a mill that large. You would have to pull logs from so far away that you would, any efficiency you gained in scaling up, you would lose in trucking, basically.
Representative Nelson.
Yeah, thank you. You kill there?
Yes.
All right, and what typically does your end product go to?
Everything across the board. So
Furniture, flooring?
yeah, all the grades are kind of split. So we make crane mats, railroad ties. There's a certain amount of the material that comes out as a pallet cant, which we send to pallet makers and they resaw them. Upper grades they can be in tables and furniture. I mean, it's all over the board. It's just like the logging piece of it, where you have high grade logs that go to make veneer and things that require that high grade, and then you have all the way down to firewood. Yeah, it's almost the same for us. There's a whole mix across the board.
Representative Burt.
Thank you. What percentage of hardwood do you think is getting milled in Northeast and Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine, New York? What percentage is getting milled here and what percentage of the logs are getting sent to Canada on hardwood? You figure, just a rough estimate.
I couldn't tell you, I don't think. The folks from the Forestry Park have a better idea. Okay, yeah. It's not something I know off the top of my head. It's getting so a higher percentage of it is going to Canada.
Yeah.
We used to have several large mills in the more northern areas of the state. They're pretty much all gone. So
Simon's still there. Making ties.
yeah. So yeah, so our log market got kind of thrown up. We've on top of that, we finally had, unlike the last 2 winters, we finally had a good logging winter. So we came in the end of February with somewhere around 4 million feet of hardwood logs in inventory, which is a good thing if the market stays relatively stable. So again, we were concerned for a while that we were going to have stain issues, and we're going, oh my God, if we have to throw all this through the mill. We've been selling most of our ash logs, mostly because they've been paying us more for the logs than the lumber is worth off the sawmill. How they can do that, I don't really understand. There is a little bit of a difference that they're sawing lumber to make into furniture and things down there, so they're not edging it the same way we do. There's also Asia tends to saw 2 different thicknesses. There's kind of 2 standards. There's the US standard, and then there's the European standard for thicknesses. Obviously, they're in millimeters instead of SAE measurements, and they don't quite line up. So European lumber would be considered too thick for most manufacturers in the US because they're used to buying it just a little bit thicker. Asia, because they've been buying lumber from both places, they kind of work in both. So I don't know if that's some of it, but anyway, that's where our ash is. So we were saying, oh my God, we're gonna have these logs that we can't, if we split them through the mill, we're gonna just lose a ton of money on. Because we've got too much money in them to start with, and then we'll have to truck them all in, and it's gonna be a problem. But again, it seems to work itself out, so we won't take such a huge hit, but it's still concerning. So the lumber tariffs with Canada have been on for a month already. With the exception of railroad ties and logs, those have just gone on today. So as you can imagine, we've been making a mad scramble to get as much over the border in the last month as we could, which has been made more difficult because of the first round of tariffs with Canada. There have been less trucks coming into the US in the last month. So normally our material goes back into Canada on a backhaul, and there just haven't been, usually this time of year, it's fairly easy to get backhauls into Canada, and it has been very difficult in the last month, to the point that we ended up with some of our loads paying US-based trucking services more money just because we'd lose less by getting the material over the border before the tariff went into place on the logs than it was just worth it. We ended up paying almost 50% more on the trucking, but it financially just worked out better just because the only way to get the loads there. So that's kind of where it is on the log side, I guess. I guess I'm gonna talk about the white pine market a little bit. White pine lumber is versus the spruce, where the American spruce mills, I think, are gonna make a killing during this. The white pine is a lot of the low grade lumber, same as the hardwood, is going into Canada, and it's being cut up for finger joint stock for doors and window frames and things like that. So white pine is gonna, the white pine market hasn't been good the last year and a half. It's been one of the worst in probably 10 or 15 years. And I think that's going to take, it's not going to get better, basically. So there's some concern there. And it's the same issue we're having. A lot of our low grade sawn lumber has been going into Canada, where they're milling it to make flooring and things of that nature, and then getting shipped back into the US. So that double tariff we were talking about with Newport's talking about, that's definitely going to be an issue for them. One of our big customers up there is kind of, their business has been off 75% for the last year anyway, and they're now deeply concerned because how are they going to compete to try to regain their market share when not only is there going to be a tariff on the material going in, but on the final product coming back into the US. So that's going to be certainly be a challenge.
Representative Boswell.
Yeah, I mean, can you just clarify what you just said? I mean, so does that mean you're actually getting charged 25% twice? Like it's charged 25% when it goes to Canada and you pay, so really it's
Yes.
50% on the same piece of wood because if it goes in both directions?
Well, it actually would be more than that, because the 25% on the lumber going up tariff, yes, the Canadians are charging that because that is their reciprocal tariff that they
Yeah.
pay. But then when they make the finished good's a lot more valuable.
Yeah.
So they're going to get 25% on whatever the value of the finished good is coming back. So
Yeah, actually,
if we backed it all the way back down to a lumber side, it's going to be more than 50%.
Wow.
I understand.
From that portion. So, yes.
You just said the spruce mills are gonna make a killing. Why is that?
So a large percentage of the spruce that's currently used for US buildings is being made in Canada. So if you have a mill that is on this side of the border, they're not gonna be able to keep up with demand. So, Canadians are gonna have to get charged 25% more. Their lumber is gonna be that much more expensive than, spruce mills in the US will probably charge 20% more.
Thanks, Urban in Maine.
And the demand is there. Our problem is that the hardwood lumber market's been soft the last year and a half. So we can't push the cost of tariffs onto the consumer right now because there just isn't the demand for it. On the spruce side, the demand is there. So it's not going to get back down and they can okay, we're going to push it back down onto the log side of it. It's going to end up being paid on the consumer side. So particularly things like the railroad tie market that we're selling in, railroad ties don't come back into the US generally. They are either treated in Canada and then used in Canada, or they are exported out of the country into Europe or other places. So those are at least only a single tariff. We don't think our railroad tie business is going to get, once we figure out wherever the price is, the total volume will go. But we're looking at 35 to 40%, depending on the species of what comes off the sawmill, is a low grade lumber or a low grade product. We consider railroad tie to be a low grade product. So having a large percentage of that drop 25% in value or whatever it's going to end up being, we're not 100% sure yet. It greatly affects what we're doing. So right now, our logs are already bought for the next 2.5 months. There's nothing we can do about it. With the new market conditions, we know we have too much money in them. How much too much? We're not sure just yet, but we're stuck with them. So right now, depending on the species, it's costing us as much as $4,500 a day to saw lumber. Hopefully, a couple of the species, because China's not buying the logs, the lumber price has ticked up a little bit. One and better, ash and red oak. The lumber has gone up, the lumber price has gone up. It's not enough to cover the drop in value on the low grade stuff to even out. But our major concern had been if we can't pay enough for the logs that the loggers can keep logging, then the whole supply chain is good. Or we won't be able to pay enough that landowners will want to sell stumpage for loggers to cut, which would be a major concern. And it's kind of, what we work in is two separate commodities. Logs are a commodity, lumber is a commodity, and they don't necessarily move up and down at the same time or at the same rate, which is a part of the problem we've dealt with over the last year and a half. The lumber prices haven't been great, and the difference between what we buy the logs for and what we can sell the lumber for there hasn't been enough margin to really keep going. And generally, we work on low single-digit margins. You know, we just put out a lot of volume, and that's what our profit is. So this kind of sledgehammer effect that's come in with all these tariffs is going to be, in the short term, is going to be kind of devastating. Then again, the next couple of months, I'm hopeful that our log pricing will be competitive enough that we can continue to buy logs. We'll probably know sometime around mid-June when things start to dry out. If we can, then I think our business at least will be able to get through the short term and be able to hang around into whatever the new market is. But certain species are going to take a real beating. And on the log side, particularly soft maple, yellow birch, those species are very tie dependent. The lumber's really not worth very much, or like in soft maple's case, it has a very big brown hearts in a lot of it. And so nobody wants to buy brown maple lumber. There basically is no market for it. So that's where those things have to go. And if the tie market is dropped so much, then again, and yellow birch lumber is terrible all over the place. And the primary market for yellow birch lumber is in Canada. Almost all of it goes to Canada. So it's not going to get any better.
Representative Lipsky.
Yeah, Trevor, thank you for your insights. And just for this committee, you're getting today is a, fire hose of direct impacts to the forest products economy with respect to tariff. But in this building, housing and affordability, yes, education, healthcare are big concerns for Vermonters. The direct impact on inflation, we're still on a high interest rate, inflation, access to affordable construction, homes to support new workforce. The impacts of this collective disaster are going to make housing so much more expensive, so much less available for all our state and regions and countries' needs. It's the whole picture. Forest products industry, which I've spent my whole life in, is just part of it. But as far as our children, ourselves, our grandkids, the impact's going to be devastating.
The other piece that's still kind of hanging out there that we're not sure, as you can imagine, we're using a lot of parts and things that are made out of steel. And so, I mean, saws, even, they're a consumable. You can only sharpen them so many times. They get too thin, and then, or they crack, and or a sawyer runs the carriage into it, and it gets broken. I mean, those kind of pieces in the supply chain haven't gotten down to us yet, but there's a lot of metal in a 10 horsepower electric motor, and we have hundreds of them around the mill and around the facility. And I mean, how the impact of that is going to get down to us eventually, not yet. So the tariff issues and things in the China lumber market, we're not quite as exposed lumber wise as we have been in the past. In the 2018 tariff trade war, whatever you want to call it, that happened, China was buying 50% of all of the US lumber exports. And again, back to what I said before, exports meaning not Canada, because at that point we were still considering Canada kind of a domestic market. They basically never come back from the volume drop that happened then. So while during COVID, manufacturing here ramped up and everybody did pretty well through that period, China's demand for the US lumber never came back. So right now they're at around 25% of all US export lumber, and it's less up in the Northeast and probably more affected down in the South. So we're hopeful that that's not long-term, that's not going to affect the lumber market so much, because again, we're just not quite as exposed to them. it is, Bill mentioned, it's kind of a weird situation where more of that lumber is going to Vietnam. The plants in Vietnam are owned by Chinese companies, but they've shifted a lot more of their production into Vietnam. And as the demand for furniture and other wood, manufactured goods made out of wood has dropped, they've been closing the facilities in China and leaving the facilities in Vietnam open. Some of that is because they're trying to get around US-China tariffs. So it makes more sense. The labor's cheaper there. Labor in China is getting more expensive, but
when we're shipping that product to China or now to Vietnam, was it all for their domestic markets or were there products coming back into this country?
in China, about 50% of it, I think the figure was coming back. Back then, at least, I'm not quite sure how it is now, but with their housing building boom that they had going on there, having an American red oak floor in your apartment is kind of the sign you've made it. Very similar to, like, we would say having granite countertops in your kitchen here is. It's just kind of, you always put it in, everybody thinks it's great. So a lot of that was staying in China. I'm not sure how much that's affected now, again, especially with it more shifting, and also China's having, of course, they're really looking at how many apartment buildings they have with nobody in them. So the housing construction is definitely slowed up over there. And so that may be part of the reason the demand has never come back to the levels it was before. They're not buying it out of Europe because the European markets lumber markets are not doing very well either. They're having the same problem we had over the last year.
Well, before we wrap up, you mentioned we've been sitting still for a while, so I do want to wrap up. I had one other question, maybe two related questions, and I wanted to see if anybody else had anything final to say. But you mentioned that you could imagine just simple economics that spruce mills in this country would be doing well. And I want to just be clear, there aren't any of those in Vermont, or are there? Who we don't have in the room today, who will be telling a positive story?
Don't believe there is at this point. Most of there's a couple in New Hampshire and there's several in Maine.
And they're owned by Canadian companies. Except for Courier.
Okay.
Oh, well. Doesn't Courier have a mill in Quebec too?
Probably does. You might own one in China.
Okay, that's just wanted to get a little clarification there. But also we've heard, and I think we'll continue to hear that, yeah, there's going to be some short-term pain with tariffs, but that the idea is that long-term, the economy is an overhaul of the economy, complete, shifting of the way the economy works, and that we're patient. Long-term, we're better off. Just wondering what your reaction is to that. Not politically, but just from your business standpoint.
Kind of what you asked her about what it would cost to build a mill. I mean, in theory, we could potentially build the processing facilities for that secondary manufacturing, but it's tens of millions of dollars to build the facilities, years and years between permitting, getting the machinery. And on top of that, a lot of the machinery is made in Canada that we will be using. And then on top of that, trying to find the labor force, not just in Vermont, but really the whole Northeast. I mean, the labor force we have some secondary production lines now that we are basically not running because we can't find enough people currently to keep them operating. We're trying to find a decent labor force and then train them. I mean, a plating mill operator could destroy $100,000 worth of lumber very quickly if you're not watching and everything's not just perfect. I mean, it's a real specialty that, I mean, it's just, and again, with the market being in flux and with the appetite of different administrations to change the rules at the stroke of a pen. I mean, you go to get this facility all built, and then all this gets worked out. Okay, now what? You know, our power costs twice as much, the labor costs more. We spend $350,000 a year on employee health insurance. The Canadian companies don't. You know, now you're at an immediate disadvantage again.
Yeah, just real quick. What I see going on is gonna be, it starts in all this agriculture, forestry. It starts at the bottom, it starts with the people that do, the foresters, the loggers, farmers, and then it shifts over to the plants. They're the next ones that get hit with it. They talk about the consumer paying more. But is there gonna be any of us left standing?
Did you have anything else that you wanted to mention?
I mean, I think that's mostly covered. I do feel though, unlike some of the folks that I know, there's been some pain around Vermont of people who are selling direct to consumer in Canada. There's definitely a danger that that business is not going to return, even if all of this nonsense gets worked out. I don't think we're going to have that problem because we're not selling anything direct. So if they figure out whatever they're going to figure out by the end of this week, then we'll kind of go back to at least business as usual on what we can ship up there. All the demand will come back. So again, we'll see.
And Bill, did you have a final thought?
Single biggest problem that could happen out of this next week is, I see as if there was tariffs and reciprocal tariffs on logs in addition to lumber. That would change the whole picture overnight. Long and short of it, that's my.
I just wanted to say that the Vermont Forest Products Association is going to be in the State House on the 17th, Thursday, the 17th of April. So we're going to be in the Senate, committees in the morning. So we're probably going to be here in the afternoon. So we can read, we can talk about what happens if tariffs go in place. We can do an update. So we'll have more members there.
Great. Well, as Jed said, it's been a bit of a fire hose, but I think really helpful and useful to hear all of your perspectives. And David, if you're still with us on Zoom, thank you for making the trip and for your time this morning. And we'll see what happens. And whoops.